What's going on, my crazy ones? Welcome to the 17th episode of the Crazy One podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Gates, and this is the show where we talk about creativity, leadership, design, and a whole host of other things that matter to creative people. So, a few weeks ago, I had the pleasure of sitting down for a live Ask Me Anything session with the folks over at Designer Hangout and Envision. And it was a really cool thing. I haven't really done anything like that. It was a pretty new experience for me, but I absolutely loved it. I love the energy, I love the questions, and I love that it wasn't scripted. And one of the most interesting moments of that came whenever Jared Spool asked me a question. Partially because it got a huge reaction. If you don't know who Jared is, you need to go look him up online. He is an incredibly influential, incredibly smart guy. He asked me about hiring. What do I look for when I hire people? And I said something along the lines of, whenever I'm hiring, the things that I really focus on are people's ability to think, their passion, their hunger, and chemistry. Because I think I really need to hire people that I really believe in. Well, that quote got picked up. And a lot of quotes from that got picked up. But that one in particular got retweeted 100 or more times. And people seem to really connect with that. So based on that, I wanted to spend a little bit more time talking about it, going into a bit more depth about it, because I think whenever you hire creative people, it is way more of an art than a science, because it's tough. How do you evaluate something that's subjective? But that's what we're going to focus on today. And we're going to focus on it in two different ways. I think the first thing is, just in general, whenever you're looking to hire somebody, when you're looking to interview somebody, what are some of the things you should avoid? But then also, whenever you're actually going through that interview process, what are some of the things that you should be looking for? What are some of the telltale signs that are going to lead you to really find the right person? So this is for the people who are hiring. If you are somebody who's looking to get hired, you can go back in the catalog, and I did 3 episodes that really went through how to really master the interview process. But this is for people who want to build a better team and find better people. So let's jump in and let's start to talk about what shouldn't you do? What should you avoid? Because too often, I think the thing that I see is that the interview process becomes more of a personality test than an actual assessment. Because so often somebody will come in, they'll go through the interview, and you'll get an email from HR or whoever the person is that's going to be their boss and said, "Hey, what'd you think about so-and-so?" And so often the answer is, "Oh, I thought they were great. They're a really nice person." I've never understood this. This isn't an interview for a friend. This isn't an interview to have an entourage. This is an interview to have somebody who can join your team and produce. And I think that you have to be able to get in there and ask them the hard questions. You have to be able to find out what's really going on in there. So I think the first thing that you need to avoid are the easy to practice questions. Tell me about yourself. Tell me where you've been, or what inspires you, or what motivates you. For me, I always think about it that I want to get them off the script, because this isn't the first time that I've had any exposure to them. Looked at their resume, looked at their portfolio, or their creative samples, or whatever it was, and that got them the seat in this chair. But what I want to do is I want to see what's between those things. I want to fill in the blanks. I want something more than just the resume and the portfolio. I want the story behind it. And we all have that. We all have that easily rehearsed sort of shtick that you do whenever it's just to give the overview of yourself. But as the interviewer, you have to get past that. You have to get them off their script. And just don't do what are your greatest strengths and weaknesses? Why are you the best candidate? What's your dream job? I mean, good Lord, this isn't speed dating. I mean, you actually want to get something substantive out of this. I think that the other thing to think about for me is to try to avoid, in many cases, historical questions. The one thing that you see is that history can be spun. It can be selectively told. It can be audited and augmented and changed in ways that somebody who maybe isn't a good fit for the team, maybe somebody who isn't terribly talented, but is a really good storyteller, well, those people might be able to bend history in their favor. They might be able to go in and to be able to turn it into something that it wasn't. But that's the inherent problem with history. It's looking backwards. It's already happened. And rarely does it give you the ability to really go in and understand what happened, because not everybody who is there is going to be involved in this. So roles can be exaggerated and things like that. So just beware of historical questions, because so often, if I do want to ask about something historical, because your portfolio, by its very essence, is historical, whenever I'm doing that, I'm doing because I want to understand the thinking that went into it, the process that went into it. I don't need a History Channel reenactment of who said what and what the client meeting was like. I want to understand the thinking and the thought and the passion and the strength and all these other things that went into it, because that's what really is going to matter to me. And I think that that's just some of the basics, right? But I think that so often those basics are what most interviews sort of fall into. So how do I do it? How is it any different? And what can you learn from that? And how can maybe you start to interview a little bit differently, or a little bit more, just a little bit tougher? Because I think one of the things that I've seen, and one of the things that I've found, and I've talked about this before, is that great companies get great people because they have a great and tough interview process. The process at Apple and Google and Facebook and all these other places is no kind of thing to be able to just kind of laugh off. They really put you through the ringer. And the reason why they do that is because they want the best candidates. And because of that, they get some of the best people. So how can you do that? And what are some of the things that you can do? Well, the first thing that I want to focus on, obviously, because it's the thing that is the stock and trade of my group, it is the lifeblood of why we exist, is I want to see, can they solve a problem? And can they think? Because I think that, in a lot of cases, this would be like interviewing a chef or a cook and not actually asking them to cook me anything. It seems ridiculous in that context that, of course, if I'm going to hire a cook or a chef or even a caterer, well, I want to taste their food. But so often whenever we transpose this and the product becomes a little bit more ethereal, it becomes creativity or leadership or some of these other things, well, then all of a sudden people aren't asking to get that test dish. They're just kind of taking people at their word. And I don't buy into that. I think that for me, I really want to see it happen. I want to watch it kind of unfold in front of me. And so I think there are two different ways to go about this. And so I think that the one thing that I'll do is that if it's somebody who is coming in for a leadership role, leadership is very ethereal, and this is especially prone to the historical reenactment sort of syndrome. So what I want to do is I actually want to put them in a room with the team, give them a problem to solve, and just watch what happens. What's their leadership like? What's their voice like? How do they manage the room? Are they dominating, and are they the one that's giving all the ideas? Is there room and space and air for other people to contribute? How are they managing that? And is it good or is it bad? And I think that it is this idea, because it really works, right? It is real time and it is reactive because it's the truth. You can really, really watch it happen. And I think that these sort of interactions between anybody in a leadership position in the team, or quite honestly, even flip it around, and even if it's going to be a team member, put them in with everybody else and see how they do. Because that's really the thing that matters. And it becomes very, very real time. It's not a historical reenactment. It's not talking about work that was in the past. I think that it is one of those things where it just really tells you the truth about some of that stuff. And I think that the other thing that I've done, I've talked about this for a long time. It's probably easily the most stolen idea that I've had, and I know it's being used by tons and tons of people, is also just on a one-on-one basis. If I want to see their creativity, how do I come up with an exercise to be able to watch that and put it on display? The one that I've used the most, it still consists of 2 stacks of cards. The one stack of cards is a stack of brands. These are brands you've heard of. These are brands everybody knows. These are the Nikes, the Apples, the Googles, the Teslas, the anything that you want, right? But these are common brands that everybody would know. The second stack is a list of products, purposely and meaningfully comical in their juxtaposition against those brands. It's gas cans, inflatable pools, jewelry. I mean, all sorts of things that are purposely meant to be an interesting juxtaposition, because what I'm going to have the candidate do is to draw one card from the brand and one card from the product. The juxtaposition then of why would Twitter make jewelry? Why would Audi make a gas can? Why would Nike make a lipstick. I mean, any of these sort of things, that juxtaposition is then what I would give them 1 minute to think about and 2 minutes to pitch me on. It's not because I'm searching for the right answer, but what I'm seeing is how much and how well can they summon their creativity on demand. Can they do it well? Can they do it quickly? Can they connect the dots in a way that's interesting, that's different, and that can move beyond the obvious? Because the reality is that as the person who's administering this test, you have to understand that the initial answers will be the obvious, because that's where most people's creativity starts. You start with the common thing. You start with the thing that most people would think of, but it's the divergence from there that as the creativity spins up and as it starts to pinball and as the connections start to happen, as it starts to go on, and that often the most interesting and the most telling part of that 2 minutes comes in the last 30 seconds. Because in that last 30 seconds, one of two things is going to happen. Either you are going to start to get to really interesting, really differentiated ideas that are going to show you this person can think in a really interesting way. Or in that 30 seconds, you're going to find a lot of silences and I don't knows, and I guess that's all I could think of sort of a thing. And that's telltale. That's a warning sign that if on something like this, that is just a juxtaposition that has no right answer, that invites people to create as wild of an idea as they can, well, in the face of that, if you run out of ideas in only a 2-minute time span, that's also something that's very telling. And oftentimes, if the person does that, I may actually have them do it again because I want to see if it just was nerves. Did they lose focus? Were they not prepared to be able to come in and do more than just their script? Or was it something that there is a real problem there in the way that they connect their dots? Their connection with their creative process is something that is a bit more significantly broken than I might have thought. But that's really the intent of all this, is that I want to see thinking, because that's the fuel that drives the engine of my team. That's what it is that I need. And a real-time example of that, well, there's no substitute for that, because I think that's really what makes it so important. The other interesting thing I think you can do with both of these exercises, whether it was the one in working with the team on leadership or if it's the 2 cards exercise, is also have a bit of a conversation with them afterwards to ask them about, okay, as you went through that process, as you thought about why does, whatever, Mercedes make a iced tea, what was that process like? What were you thinking about? What were the connections that were going in your head? Walk me through what that process was like. What were the insights that you were coming to? What were the things that you were trying to solve for? What was your process like there? Because there again, I think that the people who are the strongest and the best can start to articulate the things that they started to draw on, the connections they started to make, the insights that they started to lean on, whether they could empathize with a customer or not, or could they think about a brand and their positioning in this product and why would the two make sense? But this is the thing, this is the goal, this is the meat of the issue that you want to get to, are these sort of insights. So from there, we have the thinking. We've talked about that. It's the critical part, but it's not the only critical part. There are some other things that go with this that I think are equally just as important. The next one that I really try to look at is their ability to see, is this somebody who can learn and can they adapt? Because the reality is that for any team and the challenges that they're going to face, they're constantly going to change. The tools that you use will evolve. Your clients may change. The industry may evolve. Consumers and society may change. Change tends to be the only constant. So their ability to learn and to adapt is critical. And how aware are they of this? Because the challenge is, and the problem is that especially with a lot of creatives, comfort is the enemy of greatness. We've talked about this in the past. But comfort can also be the enemy of greatness when it comes to your process and to your evolution, whether it's part of your career path, whether it's the tool set that you use. But people get stuck in their ways. They get really comfortable. They start to do things the same way over and over. And I think that it's something that I tend to almost rage against, of looking at my process constantly, looking at my tool set constantly with a real eye and a willingness to blow it up, to rethink it, to constantly question, is this the best that I could be doing? Because for me, there's just that recognition that learning and adapting is so critical that as soon as I get comfortable, As soon as I assume and take for granted the way things are going to be is the second that I start to lose touch. And I think that for me personally in my career, that's one of my biggest fears, is to become irrelevant, is to lose touch. And the ability to learn and adapt is what I use to fight against that. How do you get this insight out of somebody? So some of the things that I would think about asking is, whenever it comes to learning, ask them, what are the steps that you'd take if you were to continuously maintain and continuously learn around a particular area, a particular subject? And this really depends on, and you can tailor this depending on what the role is. If it's a strategist, how would they stay in touch with consumers? If it's a designer or a production designer, how would they stay in touch with their skill set? If it's a more senior designer, how do they stay in touch with design trends? But what are the things that they do to learn? Because the other thing that I really want to focus on is the fact that the more senior you get in your creative process, and we talked about this before, is that inspiration and motivation start to separate. Motivation being that thing that drives you, that makes you want to continue to work hard, is different and becomes increasingly different from inspiration. And inspiration being that thing that keeps the gas in the tank. But learning is really a part of both of these, because I have to stay motivated to stay relevant, and I have to stay inspired to continue to do new things. But both of those are born out of learning. And the ability to adapt, to be agile, the word of the decade, agile. In that case, I think it's one of those things where what I would do is to give them a scenario or ask them a question, ask them to imagine that if there was a dramatic and probably even unexpected change that happened, whether it was in technology or consumers or clients or something like that, what would they do? How would they take that on? How would they think it through? Because in this case, you're going to see one of two answers. There's either the, I'm going to keep doing what I'm going to do and I'm just going to kind of, I guess, stubbornly stick with it. Or there's the ability to take a step back, understand the problem, reformulate, and then attack it from a different direction. Because this is something that I strongly, strongly believe, is that whenever it comes to creativity, when it comes to problem solving, whether it's in the work or problem solving in the way that you work with somebody, there's always an answer there. It's always, always there. It's just, are you smart enough? Have you learned enough? And are you agile enough to be able to find it? Because that's the tough part, is that if you work with a tough client, if you have a tough problem, do you give up? Do you just settle for good? Or are you the person that honestly is really going to stick in there and really get it done to find the way forward? And we're going to talk a bit more about that in a second. But the other thing that I think you need to really focus on is, are they looking ahead? Because this is this interesting balance. Because I think to be successful in any creative career, to be successful in any leadership position, you have to balance this ability to be an insider and an outsider at the same time. And if it is somebody that's joining the team, I need somebody that has the ability to look down the road a little bit more. Somebody that will learn and adapt, somebody that will invest in the team, but somebody who also understands where they want to go in their career, where their career and their industry is going, somebody that has a bit more of a heads-up view of their career, of their work, of innovation, of a lot of different things, because you need that North Star. You need some idea of where it is that you're going with your work and with your career, because I think this is the one thing, and I've talked about this in the episodes when we did on creative development. I've talked about it in the episodes that we did on kind of your career and being able to do better whenever you go and do these interviews. But you need to know where your career is going, and you need to have a North Star, because I think too many people are just simply complacent in allowing their career to be dictated by whatever the role is they're currently in will give them. And I don't think that that's always possible, or I don't think that that's always the right answer, because in some cases you have to know what you need, and you have to look for it, encourage it, demand it from leadership, from the team, from the company that you're working for, to make sure that you're still moving forward. I think that in many cases, people will give up on their team or give up on their leaders because what they want isn't being given to them, as opposed to taking a bit more control of their career, understanding that you're not always going to get everything that you need from even the best leadership and even the best teams, that you have to have this idea of where it is you want to go. Well, that's what I want to try to find out whenever I interview these people, Do they have that sense? If they think about where they want to be in 5 years, can they answer that question? Can they tell me in this next job, what do they want to do more of, or what do they want to do less of? Have they thought about that? Or is it somebody who is just simply chasing a title and chasing salary? Because those are definitely not the people that I want. The ones that are chasing the title are egomaniacs. They're going to wreck my team. I don't need any divas, and I damn sure don't need any rock stars. I need people who are going to come in and understand that nothing is beneath them. And people who are chasing salary, they're just in it for the money. And if they're just in it for the money, then it's just a job. They're not going to invest. The only thing they're going to be loyal to is their paycheck. I'm perfectly fine, very well compensating somebody for their skill set, but it has to be more than just that. So how do you get to this? How do you try to get some of these things out of their head? And so here again, if this is somebody that's in a leadership position, then that's the case where what I'm going to ask them is, what does your first 3 to 6 months look like? What's your process? What's the steps? What are the things that you want to get done? Because no matter what the company is, no matter what the team is, you should have some idea of what do you need to be a leader? What do you need to come in and make an impact? What are your thoughts? So give me what those steps are. And here again, if it's just the generic, I'm going to come in, I'm going to see what's going on, I'm going to adapt, blah, 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 that's a BS answer. That's not an answer. Anybody can say that. Get specifics, and I will ask them very specifically for those things because I want real answers. I'm not going to settle for just, the cheesy blow-off. But this is one of those things as well, is that if they're an individual contributor, then this is the case where you need to come back and ask them, what do they want out of that position? Where do they want to go in their career? What do they want to be doing more of? What do they want to be doing less of? Because if they can't articulate those things, that's a problem. Because the reality is that I cannot be holistically responsible for their happiness. And the problem is that most creatives do not know how to be happy. I will say it. I've said it in the past. I know that some people think that that is controversial or that they disagree with it. But the creatives are naturally pragmatic. We are people that look for connections where other people don't see them. We look at things and see problems, or we see opportunities. Well, that often is an off switch that most people can't flip in themselves. And in many cases, happiness is an act of will. It's true in my case. It's true in a lot of other cases. It's true of tons and tons of people who have worked on my teams who I've asked very directly, do they know how to be happy? In many cases, they will come back 24, 48, 36 hours later and tell me that they haven't been sleeping because they don't know the answer to that question. It's not anything that they've ever thought about before. But that's the thing, is that I need them to think about it. Because if all they're going to do is come in and expect me to be responsible for the North Star of their career, make me responsible for their happiness, make me responsible so that every little bump, burp, and boo-boo is somehow my problem, we're not going to get along well. Because the team isn't going to succeed. Because at an organization of any scale, even however small it might be, leadership cannot be burdened with that. It's not that I'm not willing to put my back into it. It's not that I'm not willing to invest in them. But it's a two-way street. This is a 50-50 proposition, and I will show up with my half if they show up with theirs, but this is one of those things that really has to happen. So I think that those are just kind of the two basic things. And we talked a bit about determination. And are they really going to stick with it? Because I think the other thing that becomes incredibly important, or that I really look for, are determination and ownership. And I think this is why, if you look at the pedigrees and the resumes and things like that of teams that I've had probably my entire career, you would probably be pretty shocked with where they came from. Some have come from the big agencies, the big design schools. They would have the names in some of the companies that you would expect, but some absolutely have not. Some have come from community colleges. Some came from no college at all. Some came from tiny little companies working on brands that nobody ever heard of. But those are the people that I often like the best, because those are the people that so often are the hungriest. They take the biggest ownership, and they take the biggest determination, because I need at some point people who aren't going to take no for an answer, because we work in an industry and we work in a medium of creativity that's subjective. And if it's subjective, you need to have a determination to be able to really work it through. You have to work with clients who love you and clients who don't. You have to work on long timelines and short timelines. But in either case, you have to be determined enough to overcome those obstacles. And you have to be determined enough as your career changes, because your career will change. You go from in the early stages of being somebody that will emulate what other people do to learn. Well, then that stage ends, and now you're responsible for more of your own ideas. But then once that's over, now you have this whole other thing where now you have to be somebody that steps up to try to be more of a leader, and that takes a whole completely different set of skills than what it does just to be the person who is the designer or the writer or the creative. And if you don't have the determination, and if you don't have the ownership over your work and over yourself to be able to see that and make those changes, you stagnate. I see tons and tons of incredibly talented people. Their careers have flatlined, and they've stopped because they don't have the determination to break through one of those barriers. One of the stories that I always tell is there's a designer who to this day still works for me. He's worked for me across 2 different teams. But this was a guy who grew up in upstate New York in a little town, went to college in New York, and really wanted to be a designer, and it wasn't happening for him. But he was so determined to make it happen that he spent nearly 3 years couch surfing with friends in New York City, doing freelance jobs, just simply determined that it was going to happen. And that he was somebody that I just came across his book. He was recommended to me by somebody else who was a freelancer that was working with me. But that was the case, was he was somebody who needed to learn how to pitch and how to present himself because he didn't have a ton of the really big work that was going to get noticed and get him to stand out. But the reality is that somebody who's willing to do that, go to that length, to sleep on people's couches and to essentially be homeless for years. Hell, I'll take somebody on like that on my team all day long, all week long, and probably twice on Sundays, because the reality is that determination is unstoppable. This is a kid that if I'm up late, it's midnight, it's 1 a.m, I'm going through and I had a long day. I didn't get to do the creative review with him that I should have. He sent me the comps for it, and I go through and I send him that feedback at 12 or 1 a.m. He's writing me back at 3 or 3:30 in the morning because he stayed up to do the work. That's determination. That's ownership. And for anybody that just said, wow, that sounds crazy in their head, you need to rethink why you just said that. Because the reality is that this is the Hunger Games. The best people rise. The ones who only settle for great rise. The ones who don't have that determination, who don't have that ownership, who aren't willing to do things like that, fade. And that's the reality, is because there's too much talent. There are too many people around. There's too much creativity to be able to do anything but that. So you have to have that determination. But whenever I interview them, here again, how do you find that? How do you see it? How do you dig that out of somebody? And so the thing that I want to do is I want to talk to them, and I want to look and try to find a story about something that they wanted really badly, something that they were unstoppable about really pursuing something, or they overcame an obstacle that they didn't think that they would. Maybe that was in the work. Maybe it was with a team, but it's just asking something that open-ended about, tell me the time that you overcame something you didn't think you could, or tell me the time that you overcame an obstacle that you didn't think you were going to be able to. And then it's really because I want to get a sense of, can they stick it out? How long are they going to beat their head against that wall until, they really fix it? Because I think that, on the one hand, here again, is the most satisfying problem to solve, is the toughest one. We talk about trying to get somebody who's going to come in and be happy. That's not an insignificant thing. But if the story that they tell me is how they tried something once and it didn't work, and so they went and did something else, well, that's a red flag too, because I think that's a lot of, like I said, this is more of the art than the science, is trying to knit the answers to all these little things together to see what's the outcome of that. And because I think the outcome of that determination of that ownership is impact. Because this is the other thing, is that ultimately that's the number one thing that I'm probably looking for, is somebody that can make an impact. Make an impact on the work. Make an impact on the team. Make an impact on the company. Just make an impact in general. And do they actually understand that they can do this? Do they just simply see their role as an executor, or somebody that comes in and gets their paycheck and does their job and thinks that that's all it is they can do? Or do they see that through work and through creativity, that you can change companies, you can change hearts and minds? And however, I don't know what, Hallmark cards some people may find that, it's the truth. And that really is something, whenever I come in and work on this stuff, that I really feel like I'm there to be able to make a difference. So have them tell me about a time where they felt like they made a measurable impact on a job, or on an organization, or on a team, or something, but sometime when they came in and they made a difference. Tell me what that was like. Tell me how long ago was it? Tell me what was it, and have you tried to do more of it? Because these are the things that matter. These are the soft skills. These are the things beyond the portfolio that make somebody a really great team member. And the other thing that I'll say is that sometimes if you ask them to do that, if it's somebody that is young in their career, if it's somebody that just hasn't had the opportunity to contribute like that, the other thing that you can do is ask them, it could be about a person, it could be about a company that they admire. And why do they think that that person or that organization has made an important impact? Because sometimes if they don't have their direct example for that, well, that you can still get the information that you need out of just what do they think impact is, and what do they think the difference is, and are they, again, really paying attention? And the last part for me really is teamwork, because for me, chemistry counts. It is something that I absolutely think about. It's something that I am obsessed about, putting the right pieces together to get the right things to happen, because here again, creativity and the creative process is unique to each person. If it's unique, it needs to be complementary. It needs to be supportive of each other and not destructive to each other, because different people create in different ways. And that I need this chemistry to be able to work. But the thing that's of note here is that is my responsibility as someone who is hiring, as someone who is in leadership, to pay attention to this, to understand what is it that this team needs. What are the things that they need to be able to bring to the table to be able to complement and add to what's there. Because the reality is that I've passed on a lot of incredibly talented people because I just didn't think they were going to be a good fit for the team. They were too much of a rock star. They were too much of a diva. They were too passive. They were somebody that it was just something that for what that role needed, they weren't really going to do it. And if you're somebody that hasn't been paying attention to this, if you're somebody that's not sure how to do this, I'll give you a bit of a cheat sheet, a bit of a training wheels to be able to get started for this. So what you want to do is you want to go to Google, and I'll also put a link to this in the show notes, obviously. But the good people over at CRZY Partners, and if that is not a company name that you know, well, then you need to go know them. You need to be able to spend some time and looking at some of the tools and some of the things that they've produced around creativity, because it truly is some of the best out there. They have a fantastic app that I will recommend called Unstuck, which is whenever you're working on your creativity, is a really good app to figure out how to get you unstuck and get the ideas flowing again. But the other tool that they've created is something that's called the CRZY Partners Creative Superpowers Deck. It unfortunately doesn't come with a cape, it doesn't come with any boots or a large belt buckle, but what it does come with is a deck of cards. And this deck of cards is a great exercise, because what you do is you have each person on the team take this deck of cards, and you take 2 cards at a time, 1 card in each hand. You read the description that's on the back of it, and you decide of those 2, which one describes me the best. You discard the one that you think is not the better version of you. And you do this over and over again until you're down to just 1 card, and that's your superpower. Well, as a leader, what you want to do is you want to get your entire team to do it. Because what I can start to do is I can start to understand who is the person that's the big picture person. Who is the person that's the determination person, the grit person that can get the team through the tough spot? Who are the people that are more somebody that is really going to come in and bring the team together, be more of a motivator, an energizer? But these are all different things. But the reality is that you need different combinations at different times. So it's a good cheat sheet to start to realize that if I have all motivators and I have nobody with any grit, well, then that next hire that I need to make maybe should focus a bit more on grit, because I need somebody that can really get in there and really push the ball forward. But it's this combination, this Super Friends and Justice League of creativity, that is what it really matters, is that you need the different skill sets to be able to pull this together, to be able to kind of make it all work. So what are the things that you look for whenever you talk about teamwork? What are some of the things that you listen for? The one thing that I think is probably the truest indication of this, because it is really a subconscious act for most people, is whenever you ask them to talk about the last team they were with, or to talk about the team whenever they did a particular piece of work, do they use the word I, or do they use the word we? It's incredibly telling. It's something that you can also use as a leader to gauge the health and the cohesion of a team. Because if everybody is using the word I, then they're thinking about what they're doing as individual contributors. They're not thinking about the bigger whole, the bigger team, the thing that needs to come together. But if they're using the word we, then we means that we're thinking about other people. We're working together. We understand that creativity is a team sport and that everybody has to play and be on the team for it to work. So I think that that's a real simple one, is just listen for that. But the other thing that I'll do is something maybe even simpler, a little bit goofy, is I'll ask them, tell me 2 or 3 personal things about 2 or 3-year-old teammates. Can you tell me what their wife likes to cook for dinner? Can you tell me what their kid is studying in school? Can you tell me the name of their dog? Is there any investment beyond the normal lunchroom banter of, hey, Bob, what did you do over the weekend, that you can tell me about? Did you invest in that person at all? And I think this is an absolutely critical question if it's somebody that's actually going to be leading other people. Because on my teams, the expectation is that you're going to invest in your team members. You're going to invest in their creative process. You're going to help them and guide them and to be a part of what is a very personal process for them. You can't do that at arm's length. You can't do it as some just disconnected theory that you actually have to spend time and pay attention to people to get that to work. So can you tell me anything personal about any of them? Because the other part of this can be if they don't want to do that, if it feels uncomfortable, if you feel uncomfortable with asking it, there may be some other ways you could do it. Think about asking them, when they're working on a team, what's the hardest part of that for them? What about a time whenever they worked on a difficult team? Why was it difficult for them and what did they do about it? And honestly, what makes them the happiest and the most effective when they work with other people? Because here again, these are the insights that I want to get to, is to understand if it's somebody that just wants to be that rock star egomaniac, they want the party of one sort of a thing, the one-man army, because I don't need that. It's going to be too disruptive and it's not worth the headache, no matter how talented they are. But that's the thing, is how do they come in and how do they do that? But I think that the other thing to realize is that being part of a team means something. It means believing in something. And so in addition to all the tests and the questions and the things that you're looking for, make sure you also just leave some time to talk to them. Because I want to sell them on the team. I want to sell them on what it is that we're building, the company. Because we spend so much time trying to assess people, trying to put them into a box. But I also want to get them excited about what it is that we're doing. I want to sell them on the job and on the company and the potential of what this is, because I want them to buy into this, because I don't want this to be just like every other job. I don't want it to just be where you come in and get a paycheck and don't do much more than that. That I want to sell them a bit on that, and I want to be able to have that conversation to let them ask whatever questions they want, because I think the thing that I've always done is let them talk to whoever they want. Ask whatever questions they want. And I think that if you're somebody who's also on the other side of this, that's what you have to expect. Because the big warning sign is the company that won't let you talk to anybody, that won't let you ask those questions, because so often those become the jobs where after you start, well, only then do you find out how big the difference was between the job description that they told you it was going to be and the reality of what the job actually is. And nobody wants that. And people won't stay for that. They won't invest in it. They won't buy in it. I want somebody that is going to come in and really buy into this. But those are just the basics, right? And I think that for your team, for what you need, for the role that you need, you can apply and you can weight all of these things differently. Because what you want to do with your team, what you want to do with your hire is going to be different than what I want to do. What you value because of your makeup, your leadership style, the company that you work in, the clients that you have, the creative work that goes out the door is going to be different. But I think that any successful team has had all of these things. They've had people who can really think. They've had people who can learn and adapt. They can take on those challenges and be able to come at them from a different angle, because that's the heart of what creativity is, and you have to be able to do that in more than just the problem that's in front of you. They're people that are determined. These are people that make an impact. They understand the value of teamwork and owning all of this, that it's up to them to carry the message and be a part of what that team stands for. Because only when you come together and you realize that creativity is a team sport do you start doing truly great creativity. Because the individual contributors, it's just not as good. It's just not the same. And I think that that's why this is all so incredibly important. Because at the end of the day, you're going to get a better team, honestly, by doing one of two different things. I think either you take the team that you have and you start to build a strong, distinct leadership culture. And if you don't know how to do that, go back and listen to the episodes whenever I talked about leadership and things like that, because I clearly lay it out. Or you hire better people. You hire smarter people whenever they come in. You hire more talented, more passionate, more determined people whenever they come in. I tend to think, honestly, you damn well better do both. Because even if you hire those great people, the only way you're going to keep them is to continue to grow them. They need to know that the work they're going to do tomorrow is better than the work that they do today. There is no shortcut for that. Creatives don't like to sit still. They don't like to be stagnant. But this is where you have to make sure that they're the right fit and they can think and that you're getting what you want. You know, you don't want to think that you're opening a high-end restaurant, but you end up with the cook that came from McDonald's. So get them to cook you a dish. Get them to see how they think. And get under the hood and spend some time with them. And if you need to, put them in with the team. See how they do. Give them homework. Let them go solve a problem. Give them 24 hours to come back with a design. Send back your thoughts, send back your work, send back your Photoshop file, but somehow figure it out. Figure out what's going to work for you. If these aren't the steps for you, then figure out what they are. Because I think this is the intro. This is the basics. This is the foundation of leadership, is that if you can't have people to do this, your leadership's going to fail. And that is a big, big problem. As always, if you like the show, if you liked what it is I have to say, if you find any of this useful, and I know that more and more of you do, then the payment that I would ask for is please head over to iTunes. Just take a couple seconds. It's all I ask for. I'm putting out content every single week for free. Pay me back. Go over to iTunes. Make a review if that's something that you really feel like. Write a couple words, let me know. If not, if you want to take the lazy route, the simple route, the just couple seconds route, go in, search for the show, just click on the stars. Couldn't be simpler, couldn't be easier. But as always, if you want to find out more about the show, if you want to get those show notes, if you want to listen to other shows or anything like that, head over to podcast.stephengates.com. You can listen to older episodes. You can find all the show notes. You can find the show notes for this show. Just head over there, click on episodes, and you'll find this one in the feed there. If you have any questions, if there's anything you want to talk to me about, ask any questions about, anything you want to talk about on a future show, send it on over, and I'll get back to you just as soon as I can. You can send it to ask@stephengates.com, and as always, Stephen is Stephen. And as always, the boys down in legal, well, damn it, they just insist that I let you know that all the views here are my own. They don't represent any of my current or former employers. This is just me talking about what matters to me. And finally, I say it every time because I mean it every time, but thank you for your time. I know that time is truly the only luxury that we have, and I'm always incredibly humbled that you want to spend any of it with me. As always, and until next time, stay crazy.